So, good morning. I want to begin with, I don't know the answer your questions, but I want to begin by going over a uh, Washington Post opinion piece. Zelensky, we are trying to find some way not to retreat. And I can't put this on the screen. I'm really bad at live streaming. I haven't spent enough time with it to do it well. But I want to read some key pieces from this article. This just came out yesterday. And it's an interview with Zelensky, and he's talking about give us the weapons to stop Russian attacks, or Ukraine will escalate counterattacks on Russian airfields, energy facilities, and other strategic targets. I mean, that's his overall thrust, his overall message. The congressional delay in approving a $60 billion military aid package has been costly for Ukraine. Zelensky said the military has been unable to plan for future operations while legislators squabbled for nearly 6 months. And they have. That's right. They just, Bungle, I'll get to that Joe Blogs thing. Come back to it after I get through this, okay? Because we're going to talk about that. And they have. They've wasted 6 months, and Ukraine has paid the cost for that. If there's no U.S. support, it means we have no air defense. This is Zelensky quoting Zelensky. If there's no U.S. support, it means we have no air defense, no Patriot missiles, no jammers for electronic warfare, no 155 millimeter artillery rounds, he said. It means we will go back, retreat step by step in small steps. Another quote, if you need 8,000 rounds a day to defend the front line, but you only have, for example, 2,000 rounds, you have to do less. He explained how, of course, to go back to make the front line shorter. If it breaks, the Russians could go to the big cities, and that's what's going to happen. I think the net result of this is Kharkiv, K is a silent, Kharkiv and Kherson are going to be decimated. I mean, you'll see the same kind of destruction in those major cities as you saw in Bakhmut and Avdiivka. Zelensky summed up the zero-sum reality. If you are not taking steps forward to prepare another counteroffensive, Russia will take them. That's what we learned from this war. If you don't do it, Russia will do it. I think that's very fair. Very, very fair. Without the support of Congress, we will have a big deficit of missiles. This is the problem. We are increasing our own air defense systems, but it is not enough. Said Zelensky feels he has no choice but to punch back across the border in the hope of establishing deterrence. An example is Ukraine's drone strikes against Russian refineries over the past month. I asked Zelensky if the U.S. officials had warned against such attacks on energy facilities inside Russia, as had been rumored in Washington. Quote, the reaction of the U.S. was not positive on this, he confirmed, but Washington couldn't limit Ukraine's deployment of its own home built weapons. Quote, we use our drones. Nobody can say to us you can't. Okay, so that kind of answers the question, but it doesn't. So was the FT article saying they warned them not to do this ahead of time, or were they just displeased by this and telling them like, "Hey, this isn't a good idea. We don't want you to do it." Sounds like Zelensky's answer is after the fact, don't do it, or we'd prefer that you not do it, or we want you to not escalate. And I think that's consistent. The not escalate with Biden's entire message here. We're with you all the way, but don't escalate. And yeah, we are. I'm trying to remember who was saying it. Hudson Institute. I was watching a video of some expert talking about how um, we are self-deterring. I think was the language, self-deterrence. If there's no air defense, oh, we already went over that. What Zelensky wants urgently are long-range ATACMS 300s, which he said could strike targets in Russian-occupied Crimea, especially the airfields. When Russia has missiles and we don't, they attack by missiles everything: gas, energy, schools, factories, civilian buildings, Zelensky said. Okay, so there's north of 100 of you here at this point. I'm reading little excerpts from a Washington Post article that came out yesterday. And by the way, when he's saying that Russia attacks everything, they attack everything. I showed you an Interfax Ukraine article yesterday, day before yesterday, where they're talking about Russia only targets 3% of its missiles and drones at military targets. Only 3%. How the world is not pulling out its hair about this, I can't understand. Attackams 300s is the answer. When Russia knows we can destroy these jets, they will not attack from Crimea. It's like with the Sea Fleet. We push them from our territorial waters. Now we will push them from the airports in Crimea. When I asked whether attackams are on the way, this is Zelensky talking again, as is rumored in Washington, he laughed and said, I can't share that information. Sorry. He said that the missiles are not in Ukraine now. That's not comforting. I asked Zelensky whether he thought President Biden was too cautious in supplying weapons, as hawkish critics sometimes charge, like me. I'm saying he's too slow. He's too cautious. He's self-deterring. His knee-jerk reaction is not to escalate. I think that he's cautious about nuclear attack from Russia, said Zelensky. His own view is that no, that's a very diplomatic answer. His own view is that Vladimir Putin wouldn't risk a nuclear exchange, but he conceded that the Russian leader is unpredictable. I think that's fair. The lesson: Putin should have been stopped sooner. That's exactly right. I put out when this whole thing kicked off in February of 2022. I put something on my Facebook page. There was a picture, and it was just Putin on a train, and in the reflection, you saw Hitler looking like just the same other side view of his face, and the reflection was Hitler. And I got a lot of pushback from that on, oh, Hitler's not the same, Putin's not the same as Hitler. They have totally different policies. No, you're missing the whole point. The whole point of that is that what Putin is doing is escalating in a similar way that Adolf Hitler did, in terms of if he can get away with something, he goes for more and more and more. And while the underlying policies are different, the way that he was going and doing things was very, very similar. And I studied Hitler in my master's thesis in public policy. I was looking at how life can be considered not life and then killed. Like, well, what happened there? Why did it go so off the rails? And yeah, and so so I read Mein Kampf and I read Goebbels' diaries and all kinds of things related to this, and I see it crystal clear. Okay, Barack Obama was not strong against him when Putin seized Crimea in 2014. That's right. I mean, and you know what happened in fairness with Georgia, President Bush just gave some strong words, but strong words that and $5 will buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks, right? When I asked whether he would have allowed Biden to send U.S. troops to Ukraine to deter the February 2022 invasion, he simply said yes. Wow. Okay. In hindsight, that show of force might have been the only way this terrible conflict could be averted. If Putin crossed the border in Ukraine and then the 101st Airborne Division was there in short order to meet that, yes, it would have been costly. But it also could have stopped it because Putin might have been, those exercises, they shouldn't. I don't know who went over that border. That should never have happened. We're going to have some general's head, right? Okay, looking ahead, Zelensky said Ukraine's options depend on what Congress decides. Until Ukraine knows it has continuing U.S. support, we will stay where we are now in the East. He said Ukraine might conduct limited offensive operations, but to push them out, we need more weapons. We lost half a year while Congress bickered, he said. We can't waste time anymore. Ukraine can't be a political issue between the parties. It should not be an issue, a political issue. Like our foreign policy is just something that shouldn't be kicked around as a political football like it is, and it's shameful. He said critics of aid for Ukraine don't understand the stakes of the war. If Ukraine falls, Putin will divide the world into Russia's friends and enemies. Finally, the author concludes this article by saying, I wish members of Congress who balk at aiding Ukraine could have listened to the Ukrainian leader talk about the price that Ukraine has paid for its defiance and the risks ahead for the United States if it doesn't stand with its friends. And that is really true. I mean, we're putting ourselves into a very bad place. This was a Washington Post article that just came out yesterday. The title, if you want to look it up, was Zelensky, we are trying to find some way not to retreat. Okay, I'll answer any of your questions, and we don't have to just talk about that. We can talk about pretty much anything that you want to talk about. And I'm going to go with whatever is most recent here. So the big cat, and please put, copy and paste your answer if you really want me to answer something. The big cat says you could take Hitler's rationale in Czech and Poland, and Putin almost uses the same argument word for word. Absolutely, that's right. There are Poles being oppressed by Germans, and we have to go and save them. And it turns out to be like prisoners that they shot or something along those lines that were like dressed up to look like that, and then they took pictures of it. That's exactly right. You're absolutely correct. He changed the language to spot Russian instead of German. Okay, yep. Okay, tell me what you want me to answer for you. Let's see. PR. Go ahead and put your comments in here, folks. Yeah, the Sudetenland, Ronnie. That's exactly right. So we can go any direction with this live stream chat. We can talk about Joe Blogs. We can talk about Ukraine. We can talk about Congress. We can talk about whatever. I mean, when things will be delivered, to my knowledge. I mean, I'm just trying to keep on top of this every day, and see what's happening in the news. I'm going up a little bit into some of the questions. Uh, Putin too pragmatic to use weapons of mass destruction. If Ukraine had been given more than helmets in the beginning, this would have been over quickly. Well, yeah, there's something to that, because what Ukraine was given was insufficient to actually cause Putin to really rethink what he was doing. Kristen Cruz says, "What will be the plan with the Russian citizens in Ukraine and the rest of Europe?" So I don't know, but Putin seems to think that if you're a Russian anywhere, you're under his jurisdiction, not under the jurisdiction of wherever that is. Uh, Ronnie Vraken says, "Is Marjorie Taylor Greene getting more support to oust, I guess that's Moscow, Mike? I don't think she's getting any more support. She was just given a position. I don't know why, other than raw political calculation, on the impeachment committee." And like, she's not, I wouldn't argue that she's a firebrand. She knows she's a firebrand. Everybody understands that. She's not like the sharpest intellectual in Congress, and to put her in that position is to appease her, but it's not necessarily a useful one. Not that even prosecuting a an impeachment against somebody when you know that you're going to fail, you don't. I mean, unless they have evidence of him in a back room somewhere on the take, there's no way you're going to flip these Democrat senators to vote for the impeachment. So why are we prosecuting this? I just don't understand it. Okay. When will MAGA Moses get his Hero of Russia award from Putin? So I understand the sentiment here, and when you're saying that, I don't I don't find it helpful to describe him like that or call that, because there are going to be people on the other side that you're just going to put off, rather than to ask, is Mike Johnson legitimately compromised? That's a really good question, right? And I don't think so. I think he's just playing a political game, but that would be a more neutral way to put this, so that you're actually being heard by other people. Like, I understand the frustration. I do get that, but I I I was just reading a book with listening to an audiobook in the car, and my son was in there with me, and the author concluded the book talking about how, like, in the last 20 minutes or so, how there's never a good time to be, it was about civility, but there's never a good time to be uncivil. I suppose if somebody's breaking into my house, I'm going to be uncivil to that person while I beat the crap out of them. But short of that, there's never a time to that it's good, that it's helpful to an argument to be uncivil, and I think that that's just how I try to roll here. Okay, for take that for what it's worth. I mean, I get your angst. I'm very if you're on the other side of the political spectrum and you're upset with Johnson, imagine my frustration, right? Why is nobody talking about gambling addiction as a result of Parkinson's disease medication? Probably because that has nothing to do with Ukraine here. Unless you can tie something back, David, I will not answer another one of your questions because that's really useless. In fact, let me go and block you now. I'm hiding you on this channel because you shouldn't be doing that in this stream. Okay. It might be a thing, but that's not really useful. Why don't we see huge demonstrations against the blockage of help to Ukraine? That's a good question. I like that. That's actually a really good question, MW Trolley, because you see huge demonstrations supporting Palestine. Right? And you see that, but apparently to the left, Palestine is more important, it seems, like, as far as the demonstrators go, or the people who are willing to demonstrate are more interested in Palestine than they are in Ukraine. I think that might be that's actually a phenomenal question. Um, okay. Charles Olinger says, Professor, how do you feel about the maternity baby factory wards in Ukraine to harvest stem cells? What? Are we, come on, are we in propaganda land here? Um, it's hard not to insult Mike Johnson, says Mickery. He's truly selfish and evil guy. No, I don't know that that's true. I think he is truly politically on a very different page, but I'm not, I get it's hard to not insult him because he's very frustrating to me. But I don't know that's necessarily true. That he's selfish. Like he does have an agenda, but so does everyone. So I'm not being kind to him just to be kind to him either. I'm saying you try to put the best face on someone and then deal with him that way. What you don't want to do is set up a straw man where, like, for example, the Russians. The Russians are evil and stupid. Well, they're evil, but they're not necessarily stupid, and they're actually adjusting and acclimating and learning like to use glide bombs when they're running short on like they're smarter. You can't just say, well, they're oafish and dumb, and so they'll be easy to beat. You can't because then you're underestimating your enemy. So don't do that kind of thing. Okay. Sir Garrick, do you, as a U.S. citizen, see your democracy in danger? Are Americans afraid? Sorry for asking. So some people do see that. Now, I did my doctoral dissertation on the U.S. Constitution. The system is strong. Like the system is I don't see the systems and that the democracy is in danger. I do see that we have a unpalatable choice at the top, and on the Republican side, I mean, I don't know what Trump is thinking by doing some of the things that Trump does. I'm pretty sure that that's where you're going with this. Um, I did not I've read about and I only saw a little fuzzy image of this Biden being like a picture of Biden being hogtied or something in I don't know if it was commercial or something along. I haven't seen the full whatever about it, but just thinking like that would be a disgraceful thing to do. And just imagine if the Biden campaign put something out with Trump like that, how the MAGA supporters would react. And so but that's not being called out by MAGA supporters as, "You know what? That's not okay," because it's a feature, not a bug. So in class about a month ago, I went over an article in Critical Sociology, which is this is the nerdiest thing you're going to hear today, right? It was a talking about the blend of charismatic leadership and the dark side of charismatic leadership and populism uniting in Trump. And so the people who feel that society is against them, society's let them down, their opportunities have gone away, these populists see in Trump their great hope. And because they can't necessarily kick the establishment in the teeth, they want Trump to go do that. And so the more nuts, the more radical, the more aggressive, the more bombastic that he is, the better. They like him more for that. I'm cut out of a different cloth. I'm from the Reagan Republican land where, wait a minute, have some tact, have some manners, have some decency. This is not okay. But it seems like we're just overwhelmed. And you know, I'm looking at this going, okay, so if you were to classify me, you would have called me 20 years ago the Christian right. right? I mean, I'm evangelical Christian, I'm a Reagan Republican, and if you didn't like the Christian right, you're gonna hate the post-Christian right, because like Trump's out there hawking Bibles, but the people that are buying this are not necessarily the people that already have, like, I got 3 of them on the shelf back here of multiple varieties of, different translations and, reference Bibles and whatever. But I read it. I've read it multiple times. I try to live by it, and there's a difference between that and people that pay lip service to it and are using that as some Christian nationalism in order to get an agenda forward. It's something very different than what you saw before from the right. And like if you're on the left and you and you didn't like the Christian right, you're gonna hate the Christian right. But if you're on the Christian right and you see the post-Christian right coming up, you're like, what are these people doing? Like, you don't like that either. And there's a lot of people that don't really understand their own political positions that are just going with whatever is going on here, and it's mind numbing. Okay, anyway, I gotta get back off that soapbox and look at this, see what your other questions are. How have we ended up turning in and agreeing with God-fearing Republicans in a weird world? Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, I I find myself agreeing with CNN, um, which mercifully isn't just calling me a racist for being a Republican these days. They're onto other subjects like Ukraine and things along these lines. But yeah, I mean it's a weird thing. Like, so there's a and I'm not a racist, by the way, and the reason I bring that up is because a lot of the Republican reaction is things like left leaning media just straw manning people like me. And okay, anyway, yeah, it is a very, very strange world. That okay. At any rate, Alan Coffey says, "Thank you, Professor. Europe and U.S. standing at defining moment of history. Yes, the U.S. is disgracing itself over Ukraine. It really is. It's really, I mean, for short-term political expediency, really pantsing itself. It has the power to make the difference. Its failure may have catastrophe, I guess, for all of us. Um, yeah, it's really not looking good for us here." Ronnie says, "Can you remind me why there is good reason for electoral college in the USA? It doesn't seem to be very democratic." Well, actually, it's remarkably democratic. The United States is not. It's like the United Countries. States is actually a term for a nation state, right? And so when the first 13 got together and then they expanded over time, these states were always promised to have this representation. And so you have this representation by each state, proportional representation in the electoral college system, and each state is going to cast its votes the way it casts its votes. Here's what you avoid by having an electoral college system. You avoid politicians pandering to New York, Chicago, and LA, or just whatever the major cities are, and ignoring the entire rest of the countries. If you were in the original states and you were like, you would never want to have signed into an agreement where they could just go to the major population center and just talk to them, and your votes may or may not even have any impact. So it's not the one person, one vote as accumulating across, but it's making sure that politicians have to get across around to all the rest of the around the country and other places as well. And so all voices are actually heard, even though it's a weird way of doing this. I understand. I would argue that it doesn't make sense to most people who haven't actually studied it, but it developed out of our historical experience of these 13 different former colonies that became their own, declared their own independence, so they were effectively their own countries, who then came together and were defending their own, like in the original United States. You would have thought of yourself as a Virginian or someone from New Jersey or a New Yorker or a South Carolinian, right? You would not have thought of yourself primarily as an American. And so those there were significant differences between people in these different uh, countries that have come together to form the United Countries, right? The United States, like United Kingdom, right? It's that kind of thing. So it's to make sure that all the voices are heard in each of these states, and the way that they do it is just different. I mean, it's kind of like if you're in Europe, you don't understand a two-party system as well, and it's it's that kind of thing. And the parliamentary system makes sense on one level, and it's hard to fathom on another. But I get why they do what they do. Here, the reason that you have a two-party system is because in a winner-take-all system, the best way to get there is to have the largest possible block that you can, which leaves us with essentially two parties most of the time. Now we have RFK Jr. RFK is, uh, excuse me, Robert Kennedy's son, and so that could be a wild card of some sort, but I don't know that he's going to get much traction. Some of you seem to think that he's going to take away more from Trump. I mean, he's a Democrat, or he was a Democrat, or he comes from Democrat, so I think he might take as much from Biden. But either way, I don't think it'll make that much of a difference. He's not going to be a Ross Perot. He's got some pretty out there ideas, but I don't know what'll happen with that. Okay, at any rate, I hope that helps answer your question. Uh, let's see here. Um, what people forget when it comes to Ukraine losing once Russia annexed the territories, it's the Ukrainians being forced to fight for Putin as well. Yeah, no, that's actually true. Like he'll annex this area and then take Ukrainian men and send them to the front. That's pretty evil. Um, RFK Jr. is more like Tulsi Gabbard in 2020. Yeah, I mean, like, so he's yeah. So this the American politics is a funny thing, right? Like we talk about MAGA being the far right. MAGA's not far right. I'm further right than MAGA is. What you're missing is they're extremist in behavior, and but they're actually further to the left on the spectrum. Um, some of their positions, their political positions, aren't actually right, and like politically right at all, but they're more extremist, and that's what they mean by far right. Yeah, it's just an odd thing to watch. Um, John Cooper, in a two-party system like the UK, they are effectively a coalition. The coalition, yeah, that's right. And the debate happens before the election, so you know what they're proposing. Multi-party system in the debate after. Yeah. So in the United States, the real action is in the primary. You get to work that out in the primary, and then hopefully you've sifted that out. But we sifted out some. Wow. Okay. What other questions you have about other non-American politics? Because that wasn't what I was trying to do here. I'm trying to support Ukraine. Um, it's very unlikely that the attack was a false flag, but some facts seem to suggest that FSB at least didn't bother to stop it. What wonders me, did Putin know? Okay, so we're talking about the Moscow thing. Yeah, I don't know. There's a whole range of possibilities. Ukraine did it, doesn't seem likely. US did it, seems even less likely. ISIS did it, seems pretty likely. Russia did a false flag, um, possible, but seems but there could be a hybrid of something like that. Like Putin tries to hybrid that the Ukraine working through ISIS and with the support of the West did this thing. I don't know that that's it. It seems like either the FSB was very slack, very drop the ball, or if not that, then that they were allowing something to get through. I mean, and if they were allowing it, why would they allow it? Because I mean, so I don't know what it is, but I talked about all the different possibilities, and I said, well, just you got to like think through what could actually be here. Um, like what do you think is the most likely possibility here? And I mean, okay, so Putin gets charged with this because he has done false flags before, but that doesn't mean that this one is. And so just got to be careful with that. And we also have to not just assume. I know it's this is going to be the most bizarre statement that you've heard yet. Not just assume the worst of Putin. Like even me trying to articulate it, I had to stop and back up and say, but not just assume that and say, okay, is it probable that he did this? Is it probable that he did that something else happened? And where are the highest probabilities? Not just let our own bias and I get it, being biased against Putin. I get it, I understand, but not just let our own bias about how we think about him shape what we think about what happened. The FSB was asleep like the Mossad was in Israel. Yeah, the FSB may have just simply missed it. I mean, that's they're honestly they're preoccupied with Ukraine, so like that's what they've been focused on. So it's a real possibility, and ISIS hasn't forgotten what Russia has done to them, and they want revenge. And okay. Um, RF has been extremely vulnerable internally. When bad things happen, Vlad will deflect rather than own. That's I think that's fair. I mean, just think about the vulnerability of hitting the oil. Like we started off this by going over that opinion piece that we're trying to find some way not to retreat from the Washington Post yesterday. And just think about the attacks on oil. How vulnerable are Russian oil facilities? And it's a big country. And the bigger the country, the more vulnerable it is because you can't put air defense everywhere. So, yeah. Joshua Martin says Professor Gerdes could use U.S. Department of Defense contract Ukraine to decommission expiring munitions and hardware, get around Congress. Could Biden do that directly? So, generally speaking, getting around Congress is kind of defeating the point of what Congress is supposed to be doing with the executive. The president has executive power to execute the laws of Congress. He's not supposed to be getting around Congress. When you talk like that, it's like you're talking about earlier. Are you worried about the system being run by a fascist? That's the kind of thing a fascist does. So he's constricted, but he's properly constricted. In a time of war, he has broader powers because that's going to, like, if we were actually at war, he'd have broader powers to do things, executive authority, um, as commander in chief. Here he's simply restricted, and that's a healthy thing for the system, but unfortunately, we can't get stuff to Ukraine as quickly as we would like it to get. Look, our system is designed in the United States. The governmental system in the United States is designed to be slow, to be in conflict, to be to not be able to work efficiently, but to make everybody have to work and negotiate with each other in order to get where we're trying to go. That's to prevent tyranny, which is why I was telling you earlier, I'm not concerned about the idea, or not unconcerned. I'm not nearly as alarmist as some people are about losing our freedom, because the system between the checks and balances, the executive, legislature and judicial, and then the legislature being broke up into both sides, and then federal, state, and local. I mean, it's very hard to um, to devastate the system and then lose your freedom. It could be done, but and that all that is without even talking about the rest of the constitutional constraints. So, okay, at any rate, I'm again digressing. Um, let's see. Uh, good, good, Dr. G. I'm pleased you don't wear a rainbow mohawk. I'm not sure what we're talking about. That's escaping me. Are we talking about this like the light from? It's morning here. It's 8:43, and so light's coming through my window. I guess that's what we're talking about. I don't know. Chris Bishop, they're not preventing tyranny in Ukraine. Yeah, and that's very frustrating. So we have to work through the system that we have. Look, Hitler thought the same way about American democracy as Putin does. Putin thinks democracy is weak because he can go and do whatever he wants. Democracy is strong, but it's slower. It has to. I mean, it's actually far stronger than what a dictatorship is, but it is lumbering. It's slower, and once like um, See, and I'm not predicting this, and I don't want this, but see what happens when when because of something, either Ukraine or Taiwan or whatever, if the US gets sucker punched, see what kind of will a democracy brings to bear against the whoever has attacked it. It's very different. And that's different than whatever the one guy at the top does in the fascist system that has to just obey him for a short time or in a limited way. They all, but it's almost like when my little kids, if I go in their room and I say, "Hey, clean up," as long as I'm there, they'll clean up. But as soon as I leave, it all deteriorates again. That's more how a fascist system tends to operate. It's not really strong in a meaningful sense. Okay, at any rate, I'm digressing again. Um, I'm amazed by the big cat says, I'm amazed by how weak Putin's authoritarian system is. Yeah, and it's rife with corruption, and it's yeah, uh, um, law of the jungle as far as each person pivoting for position, trying to get in Putin's favor, and then people fall out of balcony windows pretty regularly, and that sort of thing. It's an authoritarian or fascist system is just weak. Like so my PhD is in org leadership, and uh, I used to think before I actually got into the academic literature and really studied this, I used to think like, what wouldn't it be great if I could just be a dictator and tell everybody what? No, I don't want that at all. I'd be limited to what's here rather than being able to tap out into everybody else's minds and understand like there's a certain strength in all of us that's just not there in one person. Like, yes, you could send people this way and that way, but what if you're wrong? But going back to the electoral system and that kind of thing, some of the strength in the United States is that we have 50 different experiments in 50 different states going on at any given time about whatever the law is. And so we can kind of get a sense of what works and what doesn't. Did this California law work better than this Texas or Florida law, right? And so there's a great strength here in that diversity of thought that a dictator doesn't really bring to the table. Um, okay. Ukrainians' problem was they started to think they were better than Russia. I don't know what that is. Radek Suski, yeah, I think they kind of allowed it, but with the knowledge of Putin, I think they might be begin of FSB turning against Putin. I have no idea about whether the FSB will turn them on Putin or that kind of thing. That's above my pay grade. That's somebody else's expertise, knowledge. I try to follow the big political events and see what's really driving what's happening. I don't do the battle map kind of thing because that's not my expertise. But I see certain trends and I go, something's coming down the pike here. Yeah. Now I'm seeing it with a rainbow mohawk. Okay, so we are talking about this thing here. That's what we're talking about with the rainbow mohawk? Um, that's not a normal look for me, Cheryl. Okay, Martin says, read the EU and Germany, besides in some other European countries, they signed agreements like a year ago. I don't know what we're talking about. Okay, diversity in laws might be useful for domestic issues, not when it comes to geopolitics. Yeah, so not when it comes to geopolitics. So we should all be on the same page about common values about what's going on here around the world supporting democracy, and that we're not is a shameful thing. And there's always been, look, I mean, I think it was something like 20% of Americans were loyalists during the Revolutionary War. So there's always been an undercurrent of that. But as far as the administration being on two different pages with this, and I wonder if they would be if it wasn't an election year. I mean, I think that's much of what's driving that. So yeah, okay. I, Devin X says, I'll continue watching your videos, but I'm done with this Q&A live stream. Asked several questions and you ignored them all. I give up. Devin, I'm not trying to ignore them. I'm just trying to answer the last one. I don't even know what you've tried to ask. I see good thing. I mean, if I scroll up and Here, Professor Gerdes explains, do you think Poland will send troops into Ukraine to aid the Ukrainians in battle directly? Um, I think there's part of them that wants to. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to, skip you or anything. I'm just going for the last one where I paused, where I stopped talking about something else. Um, I think there's a real reluctance to do this because nobody wants to trigger NATO Article 5 and nobody wants to be left in the lurch if they do something unilaterally. But no, I think they're trying to avoid it. Look, I mean, Russia violated Polish airspace again, and they said strong words. And what we know from Putin's behavior is that strong words work really well, right? I mean, every time George Bush did it or Barack Obama did it or whoever, Putin really listened. No, of course not. That's not the way it works. So strong words just don't do anything. Um, okay, let's see here. There are 300 people watching this live stream. Just imagine us in an auditorium. If you were in an auditorium, you'd largely be ignoring me. That's just personal experience or engaged in like it's funny when I'm in class, if I ask a question and people don't know the answer, all of a sudden, wow, that the book becomes really interesting. I like, wow, I'm wow. Anyway, Devin X, it's not the professor. I was frustrated like you, but I realized it's YouTube itself. It's not just YouTube. I'm pretty inept at doing live streams. Maybe you can tell me how to do live streaming better than I do. I'd like to pop up something on the screen, like say highlighting something, but I I think you're supposed to just do it like with moderators, and I don't have a moderator. I just read the questions and go from there. It's pretty elementary. For an American voter, what proportion of their decision on who to vote for is about support for Ukraine? Oh, that's a really great question. Or is domestic policy much more important for them? So I don't know if you're an American voter or not, but Ukraine is a much lower issue compared to most of the other issues, at least on the Republican side. I was looking at the what happened in New Hampshire and what happened in Iowa and that kind of thing. The um, the intensity for the border is like number one, number two with the economy, right? That's those are the highest order values, and people vote, and Trump wins both of those pretty handily in the primaries, and he's looking pretty good on both of those issues against Biden. And I know some people will say, "Oh no, the economy's great in the stock market," but every time you go to the grocery store, if you're feeling the pinch, you're angry and you want that's pushing you to wanting a solution that's going to fix it. And unfortunately, a lot of people are looking at Trump as that solution. And yeah, and I say unfortunately because like I lose all my domestic priorities if I vote for Biden, and I lose Ukraine if I vote for Trump, it looks like. And so I'm like a candidate. I'm a conservative without a candidate. And I mean, I wish there was a third party that could come in that I could cast my vote for, but okay. But that's a great question. So the intensity for foreign policy was like sixth or eighth or something along those lines. So it's just not that high of a priority compared to other issues, and that's part of the problem. Okay. What I think groceries are high. The port closed in Baltimore will affect prices. Yeah, but that's minor and it's regional. I mean, I'm hundreds of miles from the port of Baltimore, and there's plenty of other places. But that Baltimore thing was something to watch. Um, yeah, and there were all kinds of conspiracy theories that came out on Redacted and other places about this. It wasn't just an accident. Okay, come on, man. Um, what would Gerdes want from Biden domestically? I would want him to essentially flip his entire domestic agenda, and I'll just leave it at that because there's nothing that he's done domestically that I, as a Republican, as a conservative Republican, actually have thought was a great idea. But we'll just leave it at that. He has stood with Ukraine, but very slowly and incrementally to not tick off Putin. And I in his defense, You don't want a nuclear war, right? I get that, but we've also um, we've pushed ourselves too far away rather than cross those lines sooner than we should have. I'm starting to sound like RFK here. I mean, in my voice, not in what I say. Okay. Um, how about Biden's infrastructure bill? I can't tell you about the specifics of the infrastructure bill. Man, my voice. I can't tell you the specifics of it, but pretty much on look, I'm fully socially conservative, fully economically conservative, so I'm not into trans this and I'm not into class warfare that. And his whole agenda is opposite of my agenda, except for on supporting Ukraine. And but we're all here to support Ukraine. Okay. Um, most political issues are chosen by the party to focus on one thing that's relatively unimportant. Why do Americans fall for this? No, not unimportant. No, the thing that is very important to many Americans is immigration, and they're focusing on that very heavily. Um, YouTube is censoring your content. Yeah, probably. I mean, I probably could have grown a lot faster if I would just shut up about who I am, but this is who I am. Um, if I didn't talk about that I am a conservative, I probably would have grown faster. And but whatever. I mean, this is I have a different perspective, and this is a perspective. Does anyone have some news about Joe's blog? Yeah, Joe blog. Let's talk about that. So I reached out to him. I haven't heard back yet. He's got another YouTube channel started with Joe blog dash. Hold on a second. Um, so it's Joe blog dash HG2JX. My guess about that is that it is, just what when you try to put in Joe blog again, that they just assigned him that, and he hasn't changed anything. But he's got his picture back up, and so yeah, I mean, what happened yesterday or day before yesterday, I guess it was some hacker got in, deleted all of his videos, put in a looping cryptocurrency commercial, and then now has either taken that down themselves or been taken down by YouTube. But we still need YouTube to restore what was removed if it's possible. It might have been deleted forever. We just don't know. And he's aggressively starting this other channel, trying to get back up to his 4,000 hours. So if you want to do something for Joe Blog, I would say go to his new Joe Blog HG2JX. He's got 1,075 subscribers as of before we started this, which is now up to 1,081 right now. I just refreshed. And he to monetize again, and I think he does this for a living, right? So this is disastrous. Like this would be bad for me, but I still teach. I mean, I'll be in class next week, just like right. But it's disastrous for him, and so you need the 4,000 hours in order to monetize the ads, which you get 0.2002 cents per ad or something terrible like that. And so 4,000. So if you want to go help him, go over there and watch the few. He's got like 10 videos up, like whatever I guess are the most recent that he had. He just went and repopulated. But he needs that to get up and running. He put this out on his Patreon, and he said, "Hi everyone, I just want to let you know I have an update on the current state of affairs. First and foremost, though, I want to say thank you so much for. I want to say thank you so much for the love and generosity that you've shown me over the past 24 hours. As you might imagine, it's been a very stressful time for me as I'm facing losing over 3 years worth of work due to the actions of these heinous hackers. However, the huge amount of support that I have received from my supporters has really helped me to get through it. And I want to thank you all that have sent me messages, who have increased their level of financial support, signed up as new Patreons and Buy Me a Coffee members, who have bought me insane amounts of coffees.
You're wonderful people, and your actions mean a lot to me. The incident has also made me realize how important it is to have other platforms for support, such as Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. So thank you for supporting me in that way. And then he talks about his new channel being up. Uh, and he even like linked his YouTube, like tried to say like, here's a link to my new channel. And he put the link of YouTube Studios version, so the link doesn't work, which is I get it. I'd be very scattered if I was him right now. But he makes a good point about like I'm rethinking like what should I do to have a backup system or another place where like if something happened to me on YouTube, like is there a should I have things redundantly in Patreon or something along those lines or um yeah, I'm open to suggestions, but it's pretty terrible what they did. And Joe talks about all kinds of economics things, but he spends a good deal of time dealing with Russia and somewhat with China as well, and it's very helpful. It's very insightful. It's just, yeah, yeah. He, yeah. It's really unfortunate to see that happen to him, and I'm wondering what it was that he said that caused that hack and who did it. I mean, I can only speculate because I don't actually know. But if he struck a nerve or he was just fell victim to a scam, I can't tell. But either way, restoring him would be good. He's a very useful voice. Okay. He said he'd keep local backup, at least two copies, at least two geographic locations. There's no other way. Trump will help Ukraine after we fix all the problems in our country first. What do you think, Professor? I'm not. So Trump is a wild card. He might help Ukraine, but I wouldn't I wouldn't bet on it. So I I the reason I say he might is because I don't think he has like a I don't want to say moral compass, although that's probably broken as well. I don't think he has a ideological compass. Like I can tell you, like as a Reagan conservative, you can predict how I would want to vote on X, Y, and Z, or how I would see X, Y, and Z. Right? It's very hard to predict where Trump's actually going to go, except for he'll go which what serves him well. And yeah, so would you have predicted that he'd be hawking Bibles? Really? Um, okay. So, but going back to the question, will he help Ukraine? I doubt it, but uh, it's not that the game is locked if he wins. I would look at his advisors if he wins, and who he puts around him will steer him. If it's more Bannon and folks like that, it's one thing, and if it's more Tim Scott and um, folks like that, it's something very different. Okay, at any rate, PR. He's good at presenting things factually that are painful for Russophiles to hear. He most recent vids were as simple as India stops buying Russian oil. You're talking about Joe Blogs, yeah, and and that's right. And India's backing away a little bit, but India's been like one of the big recipients of Russian oil for the almost the entire time, and that's been keeping Russia in the money. Um, XRP is not a crypto scam. It's a legit smart contract listed on Coinbase. I own some, and I'm 100% certain that Ripple had nothing to do with the hack. Okay, yeah. So when I say a crypto scam, it's not about the crypto being a scam necessarily. I don't know one way or another. It's about it's a scam that they stole his site, had 300,000 subscribers on it, and 68,000 were watching when I was doing the video to help. I got to get out of this sunlight. Um, and 300,000 subscribers and 68,000 were watching at that moment. This perpetual loop of this crypto thing, which might have been intentional, might not have been intentional, might have been just something that they put in place when they were I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. But I'm not saying that the um, what was it, XR or something was a scam itself. That's irrelevant to me. The scamming is taking over his YouTube channel. Okay, Thinker. I don't think the victim should ask what he did to cause a hack. bad actors would be looking for an opportunity to harm him since blogs is a truth teller. That's true. I mean, bad actors were looking for, and maybe he didn't have security. I mean, I wouldn't change my password quickly just to be extra careful. Um, I'm sure the Ripple link there wasn't a real Ripple site. It might not have been. That's actually an interesting thought. I don't know. So I don't know the level of the degree to which whatever was scamming. Uh, I think the old guys uh, in this conflict are failing mentally. Yeah, I mean there might be something to that. I the most one of the horrible thoughts that I had here was like you think, and I'm not advocating for Trump. I'm telling you this. I'm not advocating for Trump winning. You think Trump winning in 2024 is bad. Here's a different scenario. Trump loses and then he campaigns for the next 4 years and then wins in 2028 potentially. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm saying there's a possibility he just won't go away and will keep at that. Um, and I'm not rooting for him here. I'm just saying like he hit me the other day and I was like, oh, okay. What will be and look, I'm a Republican and I'm not for Trump because Trump is a some kind of interesting mutation of what Republican means or what it's not conservative. It's not it's embodying some things that look conservative, but some things that are definitely not. And you can hear it if you're conservative, like you hear like when somebody speaks to you in your own language, and this is why, like I tell you, if you're contacting your legislator and you're on left side of the spectrum, be as simple and direct as possible. Don't try to pretend that you're a conservative because it'll sound off. Like you like if somebody like a way of explaining this. If you're from certain parts of the country, you say Coke or pop or soda. I grew up just outside New York. I say soda like that. If I say give me a Coke, I mean a Coke. I don't mean a Sprite or a orange or Fanta or something or root beer. I mean Coca-Cola. Um, in some parts of the country, if you say give me a Coke, well, what kind of Coke? Right? Or pop is just soda, or right. And so, which type? So if you're from the political right, you're used to hearing things in a certain way, and then there's this populism that comes in that sounds like it, but it's a little discordant. It's like the saying a pop when really you use the term soda, and you can hear the differences. If you're from the left, it all looks the same, but it's not the same. And I'm just okay. Anyway, let's see. Jim says they say great nations die in Afghanistan. Do you think that's true about the USA? Well, I mean, Afghanistan's a very difficult place to hold an ongoing conflict. So, and America found out just like Russia did, just like Alexander the Great did. Um, Okay, wow, that's going fast. Could you please do a video about choosing popular policies over democratic core values? Hungary would be an example of what I mean. Reversible issues, domestic policy versus eroding democracy. I have to think about that. Um, lawfare after Trump is not the way to defeat him. Yeah, and that's right. I know that some of you are thinking that it's let's just get him out by seizing his assets or going after him in court or those kind of things. You have to defeat him politically. If you defeat him in these other ways, you're going to have a whole different problem set because um, okay, so Frank Luntz was on CNN. I got to get out of this shadow. There we are. Frank Luntz was on CNN, and he was talking about how. And is there a way that I can? Well, adjusting that doesn't help. Oh, you know what? I can do this. Give me just a second to see if this works. Is that better? No, that's not. That's no better. Why is that? Where's that coming from? Let's see if that helped. That helped? Looks like, yeah, that might have helped a little. Okay, that helped with my face at least. And below that, I still have that. Okay, so Frank Luntz was on CNN, and he was talking about Letitia James going to seize his assets in, take Trump Tower, Mar-a-Lago, or something along those lines. You do that, and he said, like, you just made Trump. You just elected him because people will react to that. There's something about it's called psychological reactance, and there's something about taking away something, even if you didn't want it before. You take something away, now you want it more. And I think there's going to be a large segment of the country that will have that kind of backlash, and may have been before that, like, I'm not voting for Trump again. Then see that and they're like, no, you're not going to do that. Um, yeah, there's something significant. Don't do it through lawfare. Do it. You have to defeat him at the poll, but man, I just anyway. Okay. Ronnie Rankin says, who is, according to you, the next guy after McConnell? Well, I mean, he already has a whip. North Dakota Thune, I believe it is his whip. So, I mean, they already have a hierarchy there. Both sides have that. Whether he wins or not now or once he's 90. By the way, if we're talking about Trump, okay, Trump is 78, I think, 79, 80, 80, no, so 77. So by 4 years from now, he'll be 81. We are making the case that Biden is not too old at 81. And so Trump will be 81 in 4 years. So I hate to bum you out, but that's where we are. Okay. Whether he's wins or not now or once he's 90, what happens to the Republican Party after he's gone? Won by serving a second term or just getting too old? Is it Nikki Haley? I do not know. I don't know that Nikki's like a shoe-in or anything, or heir apparent or anything along those lines. But the Republican Party is going to have to really wrestle with who they are. And are we this MAGA thing? By the way, Make America Great Again is not unique to Donald Trump. Ronald Reagan said, let's make America great again, with the emphasis on let's make America great again. And I saw Bill Clinton in a video. I was watching a documentary, and Bill Clinton said almost exactly the same thing. I don't know if he said let's, but he did use the phrase make America great again. I think he was candidate Clinton at the time, but so it's not a unique thing. And it's a good phrase, but it's got these implications that all mean whatever Trump is doing. And we're going to have to really wrestle with who we are as a party on the other side of this. And it's, yeah. Okay. At any rate, okay, if Trump went to prison, he could not be president. It would not matter if he were popular. No, that's not necessarily true. Theoretically, he could pardon himself. Um, okay, so the what you need to knock him out, and the Democrats understood this, is to impeach him so he cannot hold future office. That would be what would do it. But he was impeached, but not. When you're impeached, like Bill Clinton has been impeached, but he has not been removed from office. So this is part of the system, right? The House of Representatives holds the impeachment, and the Senate is where the trial is, and the senators vote on impeachment and whether they should remove him from office, whether the accusation, that's what impeachment is actually up to the place where you can actually or you must remove him from office. So both Bill Clinton and Trump have and will always have been impeached, but neither have been removed. And that's the only way to do that legally. Otherwise, he can continue to run as long as he wants to continue to run. Okay, Ronnie says, is there a good reason why the Supreme Court is dragging out the presidential immunity case? The Supreme Court goes at a certain speed and only goes at a certain speed unless there's an amazing reason, like the Colorado decision to keep Trump off the ballot. Unless there's something like that to where they have to be in a hurry up offense. Again, trying to keep Trump off the ballot, you don't want to do that either. Like, I get it, you don't want him to be there, but you also don't want to keep him off the ballot because that looks like political persecution, or you're trying to, and the argument was just not sufficient. Well, he's an insurrectionist. So said some judge, but he was never actually in a court of law actually tried as such. And right. So it's not That's not what it is. Okay. You think if Trump chooses Pompeo as his vice presidential candidate, it would help him with his position on Ukraine. I don't think Trump would choose Pompeo as his candidate, but who he chooses to put around him, I'll be looking at very hard to see where they are relative to Ukraine. Again, for us, everyone here, there's 300 some of you in the live stream right now. For us, Ukraine is a very high value. This is why we're here. We want to see Ukraine supported, and so um, that's that. But it's not for everybody. I mean, it's not a high value for everybody. Like some people, it doesn't even phase them or get on their radar, and that's unfortunate because this is a very important thing. But who he puts around him in his if he's elected if he's elected, who he would put around him would be very telling for what that is. And if it's a Bannon and those people like that, it's not going to be good for Ukraine. And if it's again a Pompeo or somebody like that, it would be very good. But we'll cross that bridge if we have to. Um, I'll look at that very carefully. Okay, let's see. We're at about an hour and 4 minutes at this point. So well, I'll just wrap up with another question or two, and then we'll be done. Why does Trump not understand his for the Putin invasion, which started on not on 2022 but 2014? I'm not sure that Trump has a lot of the history down on that, and it seems distant and far away, and it doesn't seem like that he would even say the things that he said about NATO. If you're not paying your fair share, like let Russia do whatever you want. Like how could you even think about saying something like that? I can't imagine any other president saying something like that. Um, and maybe that's the best possible face of it is that it's a negotiating tactic, but I don't think that that's it. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, um, Russia's never been great in the eyes of the rest of the world, but Putin thinks it was great. And yeah, Putin does think that it was this awesomeness. I showed this little meme that was saying, well, this is why it was Lavrov was going. This is the last thing I'll say. Lavrov was talking about how um, well, we don't understand the West. They just hate us. They just keep coming after us or whatever. And then I showed this little meme that I saw on Twitter as this is why they hate you. And it showed all the countries west of Russia that Russia has invaded in the last century. And there's like almost a dozen of them, and with the date that Russia invaded them. So there's a reason that they might not want Russia to be winning in Ukraine. Particularly true for like the Baltic states, which were incorporated into the Soviet Union itself. And Poland's very hawkish for the same reason. Okay, at any rate, that's it, folks. Thank you for your time and the great questions here. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if there's something else that you want me to be talking about here. I'm trying to provide context and help you understand things. Please, if you have not done so, go into my videos and see, like, look up, go into the search of my videos and type contact, and then you can contact Mike Johnson. You can contact your congressman. You can contact your senators, your congressman about either the uh, discharge petition. That could be very helpful, or Mike Johnson to put more pressure on the actual Senate bill. Either of those would be really, really helpful. And still, you want to keep doing that, and we'll do that until something happens or changes. But please do that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all the likes here and the shares and the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.